Hey, I'm Rob from King Grizzly, and today I'll be sharing with you 10 steps to help you make a better website. Before we get into each of the steps, let me give you a quick overview of the 10 steps to help you make a better website. Those 10 steps are follow a process, discuss success, remember your audience, make it clear, respect the context, use your insights, go after easy wins, build with your team in mind, measure, improve, and maintain, and avoid common mistakes. Now I'll go through each of these steps to give you a few insights on how you can apply them to your next website project. Number one, follow a strategic process. If you've ever worked on a website project, which I'm guessing you have, it might have looked a little something like this. When you started the project, you had a lot of unknowns. That's the squiggly line that goes up and down and back and forth. But as you work through the project, some of those unknowns get figured out, decisions get made, and you move to a place of a little more certainty and conviction. And that's as the line smooths out. And this is typically what most projects look like. Another way to think of it is that as uncertainty decreases, your chance of success increases. And this is why a clear project process is so important. It's because the project process takes you from this place of uncertainty and unknowns. It guides you through all those ups and downs and confusions, and it takes you to a place of conviction where you can really implement the best steps for your website. Here at King Grizzly, we operate on a pretty straightforward website building project process. There's 5 steps. The first 2 steps, discovery and strategy, kind of go together. Discovery is just making sure we understand the real details of the project. So what's the timeline? What is the scope of the project? What are the features and the functions of the website? Just the real details of the project. But as part of that, we move into strategy. And strategy is where we start talking about the audience, customer motivations, customer journey, maybe inspiration and competition, right? So we really pair discovery and strategy together. And out of that really comes a foundation from which the rest of the project builds on. Then we move into design. And I'll talk about this more later, but for us, design is 2 parts. The first part is really the structure and the layout of the site, and we use wireframes to assist us in that part. The second part of design is the visual look. So this is the look and feel of the website. This is where the website starts to appear like it will as an actual site. Once we have those design comps done, then we move into number 4, which is to build or develop the website. And once we launch, we move into 5. So we're either handing it off to a client so that they can manage the site, or in some cases, we'll manage the site going forward for the client. And this is our 5-step project process. And we use this with basically every website project we work on, which is a lot of projects because that's the main thing we do. A few tips for your project process. You want to make it easy to use. It should be a process that's easy to follow. It shouldn't be super convoluted and confusing. It's something that you should be able to explain to a friend or to a client relatively easily. This project process should be flexible. So as I mentioned, we've got a 5-step process, but we use that same process on many different projects. And lastly, it would be great if it was repeatable. A repeatable process saves you time, and you can make it better and better as you continue to use it. The second step is to discuss success. A good way to do that is to ask yourself the question, where are you trying to go? Sure, you're building a website, but where are you trying to go with that website? What are the outcomes that you're really after? And how will you know when you get there? What are you using to measure success? If you're rebuilding a website, so there's already an existing site, a good question to ask yourself is, what is the main distinction between what you're working toward and what currently exists? This will give you some clues into what really is the priority for this new project. Why is it really happening? And what and what might be your main measures of success going forward. And lastly, ask yourself, so what? I'm building a new website. So what? What about this matters? And the truth is that as you ask yourself that question, it's a challenging question, but it will help you to figure out the priority. It'll help you to figure out what success truly is when you make this next website. So a few tips on discussing success. Be specific. Don't assume a solution. At this point, you're just talking about what success looks like. You don't have to necessarily know how to get there. You'll get there as you work through the project process, but initially you just want to make sure to kind of give yourself freedom to think through what really success does look like. I would encourage you to write it down. It's easy to forget really good discussions. And lastly, do your best to figure out a way to measure what success looks like. That way you know if you hit the mark. All right, the third step in helping you to make a better website is to remember your audience. Now, we like to think of three things when we think of our website audiences. Those are motivations, questions, and journey. And I'll walk through each of these. So when you think of your audience motivation, another way to think about that would be what encourages them to take action. So for example, let's say that you're selling a pair of shoes online and you have a website that sells shoes. So someone comes to that website and they're there to buy a pair of shoes, but underneath that, they're there for a lot of reasons, right? They're there because they may be wanting to get in shape. They're there because they may be joining a running club to make new friends. They're there because they feel a responsibility to take care of their self and to have a certain level of fitness, right? So there's sort of a whole underlying host of motivations beneath just that action of buying a shoe. And it's really helpful to think about that. And generally, there's a few main buckets. Oftentimes, people are motivated by things that they're trying to avoid or to solve, so problems or things that are bothering them. They're also motivated by things that they're trying to achieve in life, things that they want. And they're also motivated by things that they feel responsible for because they feel a certain pressure that they need to take care of these things. So it's just helpful to think about your audience, think about how they interact with your website, but also think about what might be motivating them and how your website might cater to those motivations. All right, customer questions. Now, when your customer comes to your website, they're going to have some questions. And it's going to be in your best interest to do your best to answer some of those questions through the website content. Maybe you have an FAQ, maybe you have some blog posts, maybe it's just some of the headlines and things. But some of the main buckets of questions that really would maybe prevent someone from taking the next step with you would be questions about pricing and costs, questions about problems and fears, anything that would prevent them from trusting you, right? And lastly would be that bucket of versus and comparisons, any type of questions that have to do with why would I use your product when I could use this other product? Why your brand when I could use this other brand? If you think about the questions in these three buckets, and then I like to throw in a fourth, which would be just any questions that have to do specifically with you and your product or your service. If you think through these questions and you do your best with your website to answer some of them, it'll help build that relationship with the audience. It'll help them feel comfortable, and it'll hopefully build some trust as they get to know you through your website. All right, the customer journey. If we zoom out, your website is just one step on this journey that the customer has with you. And depending on when they come to your website, they may have a deeper relationship with your brand, or they may not. It may be the first time they've really interacted with your brand. And depending on where they are in that journey, their interaction with you may look a little different. And so it's important to think about your website and to think, where does your website fit in this journey? Is it early on in the process of building a relationship with a customer? Is it later on, once they already know you and they already know your products and services? Or probably it's a mix of both, right? But it's helpful to keep that context when you're thinking through the content and the layout and structure of your site. If you keep these three things in mind, your customer motivations, their questions, especially any questions that would prevent them from moving forward with you, whether that's purchasing or signing up, and when you think through the customer journey, when you put all of these together, it will really help your website cater to that audience which is really who that website is for. Number 4, make it clear. Clear is better than clever. And I say that because it's easy when you're making a website to really think through the site and have an eye for innovation and an eye for flair and to do some exciting things. And that's totally fine. You want to be using the latest tools. You want to be solving solutions in innovative ways. But at the end of the day, with your website, you want to strive for effective communication. Your website is a tool to communicate. You're communicating about your brand, about your product, about your service, whatever it might be. And if you're getting in the way of that, if the website is getting in the way of that communication, that's a problem. The way that we like to think about solving for this is we separate out our design phase in 2 parts. First, we talk about structure and layouts, and then we talk about look and feel. So this is sort of the communication through the website architecture, the way that things are laid out, the way the pages are organized. And this is communication through the visual look and feel, through the design, the colors, the imagery, things like that. And we separate these out into 2 steps. Now, this is an example of a wireframe we did for a local foster care agency. And you can see that it does look like a website page. However, you'll notice that some of the copy is missing. There's not actual pictures. There's just placeholder squares that tell you that it's a picture. There's no video. There's just a little box that tells you there's a video. You can see that there is a menu. So there's the pieces of the site. There's the layout of the page, but it's missing some of the content and it's not really designed yet. And this is what we'd call a wireframe. And what we do is we go through all the key pages on the site and we wireframe them out so that we make sure that the layout and the content, even though it's not filled in yet, we know what it's going to be, at least the direction of it. And we can kind of visualize what that path would be of the user through the site using these wireframes. And we figure out the logic of the site, the architecture of the site. Once we feel good about that, then we actually move into the visual design. So this is that same wireframe, but now it's designed visually. So you can see we filled in a lot of those panels with color and imagery. The copy's been figured out. There's now a video where there was just an empty box. And this starts to look like an actual website, right? But we didn't just jump right to design because that is the temptation. The temptation is you start your project and the first thing you do is you want to just design a cool looking page, right? Well, the problem is if you do that, you're going to miss a whole host of steps, right? We've already talked about discovery, strategy, talking about your audience, and then kind of mapping out that key architecture. If you do all those steps first, by the time you get to the visual design, you can really focus on the design because you're not having to figure out a ton of other decisions. All right, the 5th step in helping you to make a better website is to respect the context. Your website probably lives in a whole ecosystem of assets. You might have events or social media, email, ads, other websites. You may have one of these, or you may have all of these. May have more than these. But the point is that your website is only part of an ecosystem. And kind of like we talked about before with that user journey, you want to just think through the fact that your website is only one portion of this whole ecosystem or solar system of assets. And you want to think through, how does a user move between them? How are they connected? Is there consistency between some of these things? Another thing to think about is to think what came before the new website? What are you currently doing? What works about that? What doesn't work about that? And then think through maybe a year from now or 2 years from now, what happens after the new website has been around for a little while? Does that ecosystem change at all? And is there anything you need to do on the new site to accommodate what might be coming down the line? Number 6, use your strategic insights. Don't forget to make specific website decisions based on your strategy work. So one of my roles at King Grizzly is I'm in charge of the website strategy. And what I found is it's really easy to do comprehensive strategy work and then neglect that very work when you're actually designing the pages, when you're creating the wireframes, when you're deciding where the content goes, it's really easy to forget some of those really key strategic things that you talked about in terms of the customer and things like that. And so this is just a friendly reminder. Don't forget to use that. That's really good stuff. One way to help you kind of stay accountable is you should be able to explain why you chose the path you did. If you're looking at a particular page or a particular section of a website, you should be able to explain why you're doing what you're doing. And oftentimes that'll point back to that initial strategy work. Number 7, go after easy wins using existing content. So if you have existing content, you might want to think about what content is already working. Just because you're building a new site doesn't mean you have to throw everything out. If something's already working, you might want to reuse it, right? So a good way to think about what content is working is to look at some measurements. What content is getting good engagement or has historically gotten good engagement? What content is driving real conversions? What content is ranking for keywords that you care about? These are just a few metrics, but they help to show content that's actually performing for you. So what you can do is you can look back at the content that you already have and you can clean it up. You can look at the content that's getting that engagement, that's driving, conversions, that has a bunch of keywords, and you could say, hey, I want to keep that, but maybe I have a bunch of articles that really aren't doing anything. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those. And maybe some of those articles that are doing well, I wrote them a couple years ago and I want to refresh them. Maybe I want to add a video to a blog post, or I want to add an infographic to a page that's performing well. And then another thing I can look to do is I can look to amplify that content on the new website. Maybe I give it a primary location. Maybe I emphasize it on my post page. Maybe I feature it in an email newsletter that links back to the site, right? So what I can do is I can take the best of what I already have and make use of it on my current site. Number 8, build with your team in mind, even if that team is just you. You want to reduce blockers and bottlenecks for your team. And what I mean by that is you're going to have to use the thing that you make, or your client is going to have to use the thing that you make. And you want them to be able to manage it in a way that works for them or works for you. And so you want to reduce things that would be really difficult to manage. You want to reduce bottlenecks where it takes as much as possible. You want to reduce the complexity of taking care of the website that you create. You can ask yourself, how can we empower marketers and how can we free up developers? In other words, how can we make this as intuitive and easy to manage as possible? Well, if I think about WordPress, which is what we typically build websites on, some key features of that platform are that it's established and supported. It's highly accessible. It's extensible. You can do many, many things with WordPress, right? There's a plugin for almost everything. And it's well understood. If you need some help, there's a lot of people out there that understand WordPress. So you don't necessarily have to use WordPress, but these are some key features that we've found very helpful. And if you're using a different platform, you might want to think about, does it have these kinds of features? Is it established? Is there a large community of people and users using it? Is it extensible? Can you do a lot with it? Is it flexible? And is it well understood? Are there a lot of people that could help you out if you had a question? Or if you're not working on it anymore, can your client find someone to help them out? These are some key things to think about when you're building your next website. Step number 9 in helping you to make a better website is to measure, improve, and maintain. In other words, the best way to make a great website is to keep making your website better and better over time. And the way that you do that is that you want to collect data about your website. You want to see how are people using it, what's working well, what's not working well. And then you want to make adjustments based off of that data. Now that's just extremely logical, right? But it's easy to build a website, launch it, and sort of walk away and forget it. And what I'm encouraging you is that if you want to make a truly great website, there is no set it and forget it. You want to launch it, and then you want to continue to take care of it. There are a lot of tools out there. Here's a handful, but there's certainly a much larger list of tools that help you to analyze your website, and you'll just want to find the mix that works right for you. Now, in terms of maintenance, regular maintenance for your website is going to keep your website running well. It's going to also help keep it secure so that you can avoid things like breakage, hacking, and loss. Maintaining your site is part of making a great site. Making a great site means that the site is working well and that it's functioning well. The last step on our 10 steps to making a better website is to avoid common mistakes, and I've listed a few. The first is skipping steps. So we've talked about 10 clear steps that you can take to make a better website, or you could apply that to making a better landing page. There's all kinds of ways you could apply this, right? But I would encourage you not to skip the steps because it's going to be really tempting to avoid the ones that are inconvenient, the ones that are a little harder. But by skipping steps, you're missing out potentially on helping your website be the best that it can be. Another common mistake that we mentioned is to set it and forget it. Once you launch a website, that's only a milestone on the life of a website. Once you launch it, now you need to maintain it, take care of it, and hopefully improve it over time. Underspending on content is another mistake. And that doesn't just have to be financially. I mean, underspending in terms of time and attention and effort. Sometimes it takes so much effort to actually produce the new website that we don't do a very good job of populating the website with content, with articles, with whatever it might be, even just the copy on the page, right? You want to make sure that the stuff that's populating your website gets just as much effort as building the website itself, because that's the content is what people are going to be engaging with. Even if it's just your headlines, your product descriptions, things like that, you want to spend a lot of time on those because that's actually the content that people are engaging with. And the last common mistake that we'll talk about today is keeping the role of the website in mind. You know, sometimes we think of the website as a fix-all, and the truth is that a website can do a lot, but it doesn't do everything. And you want to be honest about the role that your website plays for your business or your brand. And for some brands, it's going to play a larger role, and for some, it's going to play a smaller role. But you want to be honest about what it can and cannot do and measure it against that. And that will help you to kind of take a realistic view of what success might look like for your website. So that's it. That's 10 steps to help you make a better website. Thanks for watching this video. If you have questions, please leave them below. If you've got something out of this video, please subscribe to the King Grizzly channel, and we'll see you on our next video.